What's up guys, this is Miasin. So yesterday I made a video on the best decks that you can play this format after the ban list but before Rage of the Abyss. In this video, we will be doing the exact same, but for the best budget decks. And also, I'm not going to evaluate decks only based on how powerful they are or how consistent, whatever. That's not the point, but rather on their value for money ratio. So if a deck is like super cheap and it's good, then it's going to be in the green section for perfect investment. And the worse it is, the lower it'll be, I guess, on cheap, but not worth it. Because some decks, sometimes they are not really expensive, but they're not necessarily good, competitively speaking. And obviously, before we go any further, friendly reminder to smash the like and subscribe button. And watch this video until the end. Don't be a bitch. Alright, so the first one is Labyrinth, which I don't think is expensive, and I think this deck will just keep getting better and better because the new Mochimi monster absolutely does not affect Labyrinth whatsoever. You can wait until your opponent puts a card on the field, and then you can start using your Welcome and your Big Welcome Labyrinths. And if your opponent uses it preemptively, then you can just chain all of your Labyrinth trap cards to it. So yeah, it just really doesn't beat Labyrinth at all. And on your turn, I mean, you're playing really passive anyways. You just go set 5 pass. If that's the trap heavy build, if it's the furniture build, then it's a little different. They all have their pros and cons. But yeah, this deck is a very good long-term investment. I don't really see this deck ever getting hit, honestly. So if you only have the money for one deck, Labyrinth is probably, or just trap decks in general, are usually such a good investment because they're really nice to play when you win the dice roll, because you're, by default, pretty much always winning game 1. Those decks are just known to really be oppressive game 1. But also, you can still win game 2 and game 3 because trap cards can interact really well against boards. And this format is a watered-down version of last format, which means that trap decks can become, you know, they have the potential of being way better. So yeah, keep that in mind. And also, you have some nice decks on how to beat Yubel. I will make a full video on it, but the Supreme King, Zark, trap card can summon Dragon whatever from your extra deck, and one of them is really good against Yubel. It's pretty much an insta-win. Flunderies, as painful as this may be to admit, this deck is unfortunately also a very good investment. The only way I can see Flunderies really becoming garbage all of a sudden is not even if a Flunderies card gets hit, because that's probably never gonna happen, but the deck will probably suffer collateral damage one day off of like Shifter getting limited or something like that. Duality maybe, I mean, Pot of Duality getting limited as well if they also want to hit like Runic Stun a little bit, just because it plays, I guess, that and Shifter and Featherstorm in common with some, not even Featherstorm. Yeah, this is like the only deck that can play like that bullshit card. But yeah, the Flunderies cards themselves, honestly, I don't think they're ever gonna get touched. So yeah, it's a good long-term investment for you. Purely is by far the best. This deck is worth absolutely less than nothing, and it's actually really good. It has a really good going second overall, and going first, I mean, you summon like an unaffected by card effect monster that can spin a bunch of cards your opponent controls. Yes, this is a great investment, and again, I think it's just gonna keep getting more and more cards from the ban list, because last ban list, well, the one before the last one, we got Delicious Memory back to 2, and I think eventually we will have Sleepy and Delicious back to 3. Okay, Cyber Dragon is just not a good investment at all. Don't even consider planning on playing it competitively one day. It might happen, but definitely not soon. The Chimera deck, I mean, it's not like super insane. It's definitely not expensive either, because you don't have to play those cards like SP Little Knight and everything. You're locked on refusions the majority of the time anyways. So yeah, it's cool and all, but I don't know, it's nothing too impressive. The deck is very mid in everything it does. It's mid going first, mid going second. It's just average. That's all I have to say. It's nothing like extraordinary. Tenpai Dragon, on the other hand, is a remarkable investment because, again, they can limit the field spell, they can limit the prosperity. It's not going to change anything. The deck still has infinite one-card starters. And deadass, almost every card in the deck that is, I mean, that we're trying to play anyways, is a common. So, like, even the Dora Dora, yeah, that card is a common. It's not worth anything, and now you might have to play 3 copies. And also, the board breakers that you're trying to play, Regeki, Darkhold, they're also worth absolutely less than nothing. Shifter, that's the only hand trap that you absolutely need, and then everything else you can kind of just build around it. And you also do not need SP Little Knight in this deck. Very, very cheap and also very good, and it's gonna be good until 2025 at the earliest. So yeah, Tenpai unfortunately still really insane, and again, if you buy this deck now, it's gonna be good for quite a while. Exorcister, yeah, I mean, it's also not worth anything. It's like maybe it's actually less than $100, and you also don't need like the expensive staples. But this deck doesn't do anything extraordinary other than shiftering people and yeah, ending on Magnifica, which you're more often than not losing to Nibiru anyways. So yeah, no, nothing too spectacular about the deck. Medolce is actually not too bad of a buy, and also nobody really understands how to beat this deck. And every time this deck gets like random ass support out of nowhere. For example, before we even got like actual Medolce cards in the Infinite Forbidden set, I think we got Vernalis Engine, which was randomly good in this deck for no good reason. So Hero is also a very good buy. It's not that it's gonna be tier 1 soon because the Evil Hero support is very good, just a little better. I guess it has more options. The Evil Assault, the normal spell that discards a card to summon a monster from deck, is probably the best card. But apart from that, it's just a bunch of one-offs for the most part, which I think that's a recurrent theme with heroes. They play so many one-offs, it's ridiculous. Unchained is a deck that, even though it might be cheap, I do not consider buying it because the majority of the Unchained cards are quite frankly irrelevant. The only ones that people really want are Yama, Unchained Soul of Rage, Sharvara, and the Chap card. And obviously Yama is the only one that has like any form of value. And if you want to play Unchained, the best way to play it would be with the Fiendsmith and SP Little Knight, which is so insanely expensive. You might as well at that point play an actual tier 1 deck. So yeah, this is a garbage budget investment, honestly. Okay, Ritual Beast is a good long-term investment because again, I can't really see any Ritual Beast cards getting hit, but Protoss might get banned. On the other hand, if Protoss gets banned, this deck can still summon Colossus because you can still search Flag into Corridor. Konami is definitely not banning Colossus because they unbanned it recently and then they semi-limited recently. So worst case, they're gonna ban Protoss and you can still make Colossus, which is not too big of a deal. And yeah, other than that, it's still a decent deck. So I don't really have anything like super negative to say about it, but I'm still gonna put it at the very bottom of perfect investment because it is a little more expensive than these decks because you still need more expensive like staples. I mean, you do have to play SP Little Knight, I think, in this deck in order to make it work, but it's not like it's super important. So I don't know. It's not too bad. Vanquish Soul, it's very mid. It reminds me a lot of Chimera. Both of these decks are pretty much on the same league. I'm not a super big fan of this deck. Despia is absolutely divine investment, like ridiculously good because this deck is also worth absolutely less than nothing. And this deck is also going to survive for so long. I mean, it's been around since 2020. No, I'm obviously exaggerating. Since like 2022 or something. And this deck is probably going to keep living for like the next 3 years or something. Because Konami has no intention in banning Gimmick Puppet Nightmare or Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. They're just limiting Branded Fusion, which does nothing because you get to play like 12 other versions of Branded Fusion. I mean, 12 other cards that can get you to Branded Fusion. I might be exaggerating on the numbers, but not even. I think the likelihood of seeing Branded Fusion is so ridiculously high in this deck that you could have one Branded Fusion in a 60 card deck, and 9 times out of 10, you find a way to get access to Branded Fusion one way or another. Sometimes you search it with a Luber or something like that, or sometimes you just mill it and then you can recycle it back with a Trap Card's Graveyard effect. So yeah, or Despian Tragedy. Mermail is a great investment in the long run, but I would still put it in decent buy. By the way, this is not the Mermail of right now, but the Mermail of Rage of the Abyss. Honestly, this deck is very dependent on if the Molchemy cards will survive or not, so that's the reason why I can't put it in perfect investment, unfortunately. Lightsworn, yeah, I don't think this deck is ever going to be like super insane because it doesn't really have any room for non-engine. It's literally in the exact same league as Tier Elements. These two decks are very similar. They share so much in common. They have the same strengths and weaknesses, practically. Yeah, so it's really just, yeah, the same shit. Gimmick Puppet is a decent buy, but I'm gonna have to put it at the very bottom because it's so easy for Konami to just randomly destroy this deck in the ban list. But if people keep topping with this deck, what they're gonna do is that they're just gonna finish off the FTK once and for all. And without the FTK, Gimmick Puppet doesn't really have too much going for it, unfortunately, it's sad to say. Paleozoic, so Joshua Schmidt's deck. I mean, this deck is cute if you're trying to have fun, but to be honest, yeah, sure, it's very cheap. It's not the best deck that you can play, competitively speaking. Labyrinth and Eldritch are drastically better. Melodious is definitely one of the best buys because this deck at any moment, if we get a ban list that, a format where hand traps are prevalent instead of board breakers and nobody plays Dark Ruler and Droplet, this deck is absolutely cracked because it doesn't really lose to hand traps, but it does lose to Dark Ruler and Droplet, which is the reason why it's not seeing too much play right now. But going second, this deck is quite good, and it can play so many hand traps itself, so that's something really nice about Melodious. Dragon Link, I'm gonna have to put it somewhere there just because, at any moment when Bestials are gonna be good, this deck is also gonna be somewhat decent. And also this deck is getting indirect support very soon in Rage of the Abyss in the form of the Metal Morph engine. There you go, that summons the Red Eyes Darkness Metal something. I forgot the name. I don't really care, honestly. Goblin Biker, at the moment it's really cheap, but even though I think it's a really good deck, I mean, it's gonna be a good deck, it's not gonna be an investment that you're gonna be really happy about, because the Goblin Biker cards themselves, I don't think will be going that much up in value over time, because they're all really cheap. The expensive cards in Goblin Biker are the Fiendsmith cards, SP Low Knight, etc. All the generic staples that are super annoying to get. So this deck, on the surface, it looks like a budget deck. Unfortunately, it really isn't. Trap Tricks, I mean, it's honestly worse than Eldritch and Labyrinth, so yeah, it's also just a cheap deck that isn't worth it, unfortunately. Shark is pretty much on the same league as Mermail, but probably a little better just because it can also play like Shifter, whereas Mermail, it gets bodied by Shifter. So yeah, this deck I think is a little more flexible. It does lose a little hard to Dark Ruler and Droplet, whereas this, you're hand looping your opponent. So if anything, you want your opponent to have more breakers. And also you have Abyss Skill of the Mizuchi, which is one of those very weird cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That can still negate Dark Ruler. And also negate Super Poly, which is absolutely disgusting. These two decks are both pretty good over time. Marincess is another one of those water decks. I think Konami is going to push the water attribute this year. So that's the reason why I can believe that the Marincess is going to be maybe a little better. If there was just, I mean, there's also like a new Marincess monster coming out very soon, and it's also a really good card. Gets you some hand knowledge, and it's an extender for Bahamut Shark into Toad. So we can always appreciate that. Eldritch is a very good investment, even though it might not look like it is. It can play Dominus Purge, which currently exists, and if Labyrinth ever gets hit a bit, then this deck is going to be pretty much on the same level as it. So, for example, if Big Welcome Labyrinth goes to 1, I want to say Eldritch and Labyrinth are finally relatives, but for now, unfortunately, Labyrinth is much better than Eldritch. But again, it's just a matter of time before things change, and I think Eldritch is in a good position in the future. Runic Stun, okay, I mean, it's a great investment because it's worth absolutely nothing, but maybe it's just gonna get indirectly hit every single time with like Floodgates getting banned, like Skill Drain getting banned, Rivalry, Goes in Match, there can only be one, because I don't even think Konami should have limited them. They should have just banned those cards instead. So if those cards get banned, then Runic Stun is pretty much like a quickly spelled deck only, which is not good enough. Exodia, yeah, I mean, it's a Shifter deck. It's not bad at all, but it's also not expensive. The Millennium cards are cards that I think will be getting better in the future. So just because of that, if you buy the Exodia deck, at least you're also buying a bunch of cards that I think are just very good as they are. For example, the Caveman, the level 8 monster. This card, I can see it being splashed in a bunch of decks. So just because of that, I think this is a decent investment. The Sprite deck, I mean, if Sprite Elf ever gets unbanned, then obviously this is like up here. But I think even at the current moment, it always gets indirect support. Like, for example, even the Fiendsmith engine is good in Sprite, and it also kind of fixes like the Molchami issue that the deck had. So yeah, no, it's a cool deck, and also there's always gonna be those guys that are gonna try to make that deck work. And also, again, like indirect support off of like the Ice Bearers cards and everything. And speaking of Ice Bearer, this is also another decent investment. We got 4 water decks in a row, and this also plays Toad, so it's kind of like a water deck. And finally, we got Mimighoul, which is not a good investment because I think Konami is going to completely blow the TCG exclusive in Rage of the Abyss. It's probably going to be dog shit, and because of that, Mimighoul is going to be bad. But I could be wrong. Maybe the TCG exclusive is going to be like Spiral Double Helix kind of level of insanity, and because of that, it's going to be the best deck. But I really doubt it because at the current moment, the Mimighoul cards are super cheap, so I don't think they're just going to make like a complete 180 and create a tier 0 deck that is worth nothing. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.